I apologize for my nasally sound. I have a bacterial infection in my sinuses, so uh, that's the way it seems to go. Um, this is a reminder. Uh, we are recording this, and we posted a Google Drive after the meeting, and by joining and participating, you consent voluntarily to being recorded. So, but please do keep your cameras off, partly to save bandwidth as well as any other rules we may hopefully not run afoul of. Uh, so with that reminder out of the way, I think as we always seem to do, we do a little briefing on the weather conditions. It's as you probably have heard in the news recently, there was I didn't have time to put it in here, but the Texas WFO was talking about historical fire danger down in Texas. Uh, there's been very low humidity in the southeast. We're also going to get more warmer weather, but then colder temperatures, maybe some precipitation in the next week. So it's kind of fluid as we seem to go, but it seems more like the Southwest is going to be potentially in line of fire. No, not trying to not pun intended there, but it is going to be where they're going to be most likely affected. This is as of the 28th, so last Friday. There were 13 incidents that were being done, and I think a total of 21 new fires since the last report. So you can kind of see that the year has already started. Well, the year always seems to start this year around fire season now. So yeah, we seem to be going at it. I need to correct that time. I wanted to actually point this out because this is something interesting I saw, is that from January to March 2025, they had the outlook, and it really did not change from what the latest outlook is for March. The same locations, maybe a few little differences here, but by and large, and even in Southern California, there's an increase in potential for wildland fire potential. And then, of course, just as we go through the months, you can kind of see those same areas. Another thing to point out is, and I was talking about a different topic of river ice and flooding. Alaska, especially the area in Anchorage area, the southern, they'll call it southern part, not the Juneau region, but that whole area around Anchorage and the lake is actually now in an area of significant wildfire potential. And in talking with the folks up in Anchorage, their last little snow piles had actually melted as of yesterday. So, it isn't even the normal fire season, and they're already in a potential for high wildfires down there. But again, you note Texas, which has been in the news. Drought monitor, again, very interesting. It's obviously where the droughts are, where you're going to have more potential for wildfires, but even up here in the northern part of the country, we are still in a drought, and even southwest Alaska as well. So, some fires of interest. I didn't have time, of course, to put in the anything from Texas, but there were a series of wildfires in Georgia and the Carolinas that erupted. There's images there of the from the Horry County Fire Rescue. You can see the fire. I know if people know who the actor Ryan Reynolds is. He was landing in the Myrtle Beach area and took videos as he was landing. That's how obvious these fires were. So today we have two presentations. First we'll have John Bonk talk. He's a fire weather meteorologist at the Northwest Interagency Coordination Affairs for Bureau of Indian Affairs, Northwest Region. And then after John talks and we have a little time for questions, Arunas will be giving some updates on the NRL PyroCB project. So I will stop sharing my screen, John, and you can take it away.
All right, thanks, William. Let's see. There we go. And it looks like you can see my slide deck.
Yep, we can see the slide deck.
Excellent. All right. There, just getting stuff out of the way. Great, yeah. So, as we mentioned, my name is John Bonk, and I'm a fire weather meteorologist who is working for the Bureau of Indian Affairs Northwest Regional Office. But I'm permanently assigned over to the Northwest Interagency Coordination Center. And I last spoke with this group, was probably about a year ago, just to give an update on kind of how we do business here and ways that this particular JPSS Fire and Smoke Initiative group could help our mission. And boy, let me tell you, you guys came through really strong in especially with a couple products that I'll highlight here coming up. That being said, we'll just kind of jump right into that. There we go. So again, outline, just going to be providing initiative-related tool usage, at least from my personal perspective here at NWCC for 2024. And they're talking about the discontinuation of Haynes and LAL, and if folks weren't aware. And then finally, highlight some of the transitions going on as the WIMS is decommissioned, which has been in place, for at least almost, I would think, like 30 years, if I remember my history right. And it's going to be transitioning to a new system called FEMS. And before I continue on, let me just give an idea of what we do here at Northwest Energy Coordination Center. And my role specifically is, along with my partner, John Saltenberger, we look for weather conditions that go out into the future where movement of firefighting resources can be done proactively. And that's the center itself deals with the movement of firefighting resources among Oregon and Washington, but not just Oregon and Washington, but in exchange with other geographic areas across the country and in some cases even internationally. So our focus is on Oregon and Washington weather. But we work very closely with our surrounding coordination center, predictive service meteorologists, and also with our national center as well. So the products that you guys have provided me, I've passed on to these folks, and we've gotten some good feedback. All right, so digging in, initiative-related tool usage. First one that I want to highlight is the NGFS system there, and in particular with the dashboards. I get the desire to have that rapid alerting capability, but we're not the target audience, I think, on this particular dashboard. We can't really use it from a regional view situational awareness tool. We get when we're looking at a statewide or multi-state area, I was constantly getting pinged by the various new alerts, and I really had a hard time, finding kind of those more persistent fire signals out of the noise. And I found that I spent more time hiding those alerts versus, again, being able to quickly recognize those persistent targets that might be of interest to the center manager here, and just firefighting resources as a whole. Again, might be great on a county level, or maybe if you can provide capability to add a user-defined area. Like I'm thinking from like a fire management officer for a particular fire unit. Maybe if you can let them at least draw in an area that they can look at, that would be probably a really great capability, and then have alerts based on that user-defined area. What really was the bread and butter for my usage, and what I really sold to those same users is the satellite imagery. It's much more useful for maintaining situational awareness across a broader geographic area. We could really easily pick out those persistent targets just by looking at the image and running in a loop and say, oh, that spot's been there for a while. Let's take a look. I'd use this imagery daily for briefings that I provide, not just to the center folks here, but also to regional fire leadership briefings that we provide every day during fire season. Again, when I'd present this as a new tool available to various facets of the fire community, this was a very popular item for them to show interest in. One thing that I've done just through using the interface and having more familiarity with the real Earth setup is I would suggest adding the GOES global lightning mapper layers as part of a standard option for both both the east and west satellite uh, um, show all products because a lot of these folks are also going to be interested in lightning, and the more one-stop shopping that they can do is going to be great. I don't think they need the high precision detail that you'd get off of the terrestrial lightning networks, but at least having that awareness for these folks that some lightning's going on, and then they can dig deeper if they choose. And one thing is, I really appreciated the new ability, or at least an ability to show the different event types. I'm going to highlight a scenario here that happened somewhat recently. I saw a persistent hotspot and target appearing over eastern McMinnville, Oregon. And then once I hovered over it and saw that ferrous metal event type, I'm used to seeing prescribed fire if it's already in the system, or wildfire, whether it's unknown or known and such. But to see ferrous metal, like that's cool. And then, so not having seen that before, dug into Google Maps to see what it could be, and then I discovered that we had the Cascade Steel rolling mills there, right in that same area of eastern McMinnville, and so it solved a mystery for both us here, but also for the Pacific Northwest Weather Service meteorologists that had also noticed that kind of persistent spot there. So thank you for that. I thought that was pretty interesting. Another item from this particular group that really got a lot of usage, especially from me, over last fire season and continues to, is the satellite-derived fuel moisture monitoring. The folks that really gained a lot of interest out of this would be the fire management staff and the fuels planners across the geographic area here in the Northwest. I myself would check it at least weekly, and sometimes more frequently, depending on, if we got a good douse of rainfall across a previously dry area, it'd be great to see how things change. And then we had the Pioneer Fire up in Lake Chelan, and that is kind of right in this area. And that started running into some mixed fuel moistures. There's a fire that started in June, and so lower slopes were more readily burning, and then we got some action happening across some higher elevations that was kind of surprising. And it turns out that taking a look at the fuel moisture contents where there's no solid ROS data, really, proved to show where the fire was going to at least check up for a while, and at least, anecdotally, it did a great job. So, it's one of those tools that is going to be really helpful, I think, for not just us on a regional level, but even for the individual units or individual incidents. I did some spot checking against some Central Oregon live fuel moisture samples that we received, courtesy of Oregon State University, and the values on the live fuel moistures seemed fairly close. One question that I have is, I'm still not exactly sure what live fuel type is being modeled in this display. And so maybe I'm missing the documentation there. So if you guys can point me towards documentation on that, or if it's just listed, then I apologize that I've missed that. Also spot checked against some of the few RAWs in our areas that still have 10-hour fuel stick data, and again, the 10-hour fuel moisture content value seemed really close. So it's kudos on this project, as I think it's going to also prove to be again a good situational awareness tool, especially for portions of, or for areas very similar to Eastern Oregon, where yes, there's a handful of RAWs out there, but there's a lot of vast space and no roads in between them. So nobody's really got a solid set of eyes on the ground to see what at least the live fuels are doing out there. So again, this will be getting a lot of attention, at least for myself and some of the other fire folks as we go through our spring here. Okay. Moving on to discontinuation of Haynes and LAL. Again, I'll just do a kind of a quick run through, and this is going to be using a presentation that has been given many times over the last really 12 months. And this was created by Darren Clavo out of South Dakota. And then Jim Wallman, who is the National Emergency Coordination Center Predictive Service Meteorologist, as well as folks that are on the National Wildland Coordinating Group, Wildland Fire Coordinating Group, fire weather subcommittees. So real quick, what we're talking about is that has been removed. This has all already happened, was the lightning activity level and then Haynes index. And we'll dig into these each in a little bit more. So, Haynes index, it was basically a study done across the Great Lakes region, but looked at a couple different sites, one around the Great Lakes and then one in Arizona, to try and assess, where you're going to see a large fire or significant fire growth due to atmospheric instability and moisture. So, bottom line is that yes, while it had success, but there was also many cases where it didn't work. And Haynes himself, as part of his conclusion in the paper that he wrote, said it's only a first effort. More research was needed, and certainly more research across various parts of the country to see if that applicability of his work still holds. It doesn't factor in wind, and it by itself is not a stability metric. So here's an example of just one of the classic failures as I see it. So in short, values of 5 and 6, most firefighters would presume, it's a game on day. Things are going to be happening. Anything for values of 2 through 4 were, not, that wouldn't be the foremost thought in their head that they're going to see some significant fire growth. So in this particular example of the Bear Fire in the North Complex in 2020 in the Plumas Forest in Northeast California, the modeled Haynes index from the weather models was a 3 or a 4, indicating, as the words state in the Haynes index, very low to low potential for large fire growth. Well, looking at that picture, clearly it was quite the contrary. And in this case, in some of my personal experience, where we see a Haynes index of 4, it's usually because you have extremely unstable conditions as part of that parameter that goes into the index, but also high moisture content. And at least the initial conclusions of the paper would say that results in very low potential for large fire growth. But as we can see, and as a later presentation will show from Arunas, that pyrocumulus is a whole nother beast that can really dramatically result in significant, if not deadly, fire behavior. And so this was a case where the Haynes index was 3 or a 4, depending on where you're looking. And this was the result, and some massive fire growth happened underneath that. And in addition, you had some wind to further push lofted embers downwind and create rapid spread rates as well. Alternatively, you can end up with conditions that are Haynes 5 or 6, meaning that you've got, according to the Haynes index, extremely dry, extremely unstable conditions through the layer that's being sampled. For example, a 10 to 18,000 foot layer, or 700 to 500 millibars. But then you end up with a subsidence inversion that's sitting below that, and so there's just no way that you're going to see those surface conditions and any surface fire heat and smoke that gets generated break through that subsidence inversion to then tap into the much higher instability layer that is out there. So inversions are a place where Haynes would often fail, and at least here across the Pacific Northwest, maritime inversions are a huge factor that you have to look at everything. So Haynes index was not a reliable source. As far as replacements go, again, this was have already been dropped as of February 1st. Across these products have been these tools have been dropped from the National Weather Service as of February 1st. There's now no official forecast elements been created to replace it. Forecasters are encouraged to put it within their discussion section of the fire weather planning forecasts. I've had some success, or I've had actually a fair amount of success using mixing heights to infer stability. You'll see that in some of the fire weather planning forecasts, but there's a lot of reasons why that won't work as well. And so I'm fully accepting of that. And the big one is it's hard to handle a mixing height forecast and relate it to fire activity unless you've already had a fire recently on the ground in that area. So it's a difficult tool to use, I think, as forecasting. But there's still research going on with that. Let me see. One option that recently had some conversations with Brian Potter up at the Pacific Northwest Research Station is possibly using lapse rates in a fixed layer above ground layer as another option. And above ground is a very important distinction. If we base this on millibar layers, then you're going to run into a lot of terrain that is either very near that millibar layer or even subsurface. And so we realize that above ground is going to be an important factor on that. So it's loosely being explored. And then the Naval Research Laboratory PowerQ project looks like it may have some applicability, of which Arunas Kuchauskas will be talking about here after I'm done. Lightning activity level, it was really it was taken out because it was just never was appropriately applied. It is very simple. It was originally that observational aid for Western Montana, and then was applied nationally as an input into the National Fire Danger Rating System calculations. However, that was dropped many years ago. And again, it was never designed to be forecasted element. There's very little skill in using this lightning activity level for lightning amounts that actually are hitting the ground. And you'd see that forecast methods were differing a lot between the Weather Service offices. The main items that were really coming into play, and how the forecast tool that was developed and used by National Weather Service really focused on chance of precipitation from their graphical forecast grids. And really notice I didn't say the chance of thunderstorms, although you can derive a chance of thunderstorms from those precipitation forecast probabilities. And then what the tool would simply do is look and see what the wording was in the weather grid, and then assign a lightning activity level. So while an LAL of 4 was to indicate significant lightning production, cloud to ground, within a given point, it never took into account any of the dynamics of the atmosphere, nor was it. There's just no scientific basis on what the tool was putting out, to keep it short there. And there was a function here of an LAL6, which was meant to imply something more than just an isolated thunderstorm that produced very little rainfall at the ground. And it's kind of a given that if you're getting lightning hitting the ground without a lot of rainfall, you've got a greater propensity to have thunderstorms developed, to have new fires develop. But that usage of LAL6 was incredibly subjective, and forecasters had to go through I would just from personal experience, a somewhat laborious process to insert and force an LAL6 into the tool. So, generally speaking, for both of these products, or both of these items, forecast elements, the National Fire, or the NWCG Fire Weather Subcommittee started working on putting justification and background and some of the prior 5 to 10 years of work justifying the removal. And then ultimately, February 2025, National Weather Service officially removed Haynes Index and LAL from their products. So, what are we looking at? The big one that I'm hearing from a lot of the fire community is finding a replacement for the lightning activity level. And really the big thing is reliable, consistent forecast information for lightning density. And I see, some of the models, like the European model, the ECMWF, will forecast a lightning density, but it's great for at least indicating here in the Northwest where lightning may occur. And there's some skill with where it, may be a lot more, maybe not say a lot more concentrated, but I've just anecdotally, again, I've seen it fail as much as it's had success. So it's not something that is super reliable in the short term, like at least in the warning periods where the National Weather Service is going to issue their red flag warnings for lightning. I think they're still going to continue to rely more on some of the subjective, some of the objective, and largely just a lot of forecaster experience, say, using pattern recognition. This is a time when we get a lot of lightning and so on and so forth. Some of the higher resolution weather models are certainly helping in that regard. And there's efforts out there, and just nothing has really stood out to me personally that says, oh, here's my go-to every time. And this is where I'm going to see, say, this particular thunderstorm or this area receive 100 lightning strikes versus 10 or versus 1,000. So that's work that would be helpful. And then as far as the Haynes Index, again, I already laid out some of the efforts being put forth for that as well, and really looking forward to what Arunas has to convey there. Let's see, I went through that. If you want more information, at least on the Haynes Index and why Darren felt like it should be removed from usage, he's got a great three-part series there on the Haynes Index and why it just doesn't work. And there's also some papers, including one by Brian Potter, or a couple by Brian Potter, where he also discusses the limitations of the Haynes Index. All right, moving on now to one that is going to be pretty important if you haven't heard about this already, is the WIMS to FEMS transition. So WIMS, Weather Information Management System, is being decommissioned. It's based on 1990s antiquated web technology, which was ultimately built on top of 1970s mainframe database structuring. The database has been modernized in recent years, but really the overall tool and interface is pretty cumbersome to be used, somewhat text-based, and for fire analysts to do their analysis work, they still had to get data from multiple sources to paint a complete wildfire picture analysis. So you had to pull this many years of data of weather data from this source, and then you had to go get the other years from a different source, and then the fire danger indices would have to be recalculated, and it's just a cumbersome setup. So WIMS, Weather and Fire Danger, is going to be decommissioned with the incoming data flow to WIMS turned off October 1st. And then the underlying contract, database contract that runs WIMS or provides WIMS with data along with many other fire applications, that contract is expiring October 31st. And there's no direct conversion. There's just such a mass of data out there that it's just not feasible to bring it into a new format from when the folks that are running these teams were told that the contract was going to be allowed to expire. So with that in mind, nothing from WIMS was carried over into FEMS because we wanted to do, the team developers wanted to have a nice, clean, fresh start, and I think I heard directly, let's do this right, and let's make it so that we've got a usable, robust system. So the replacement for WIMS is called Fire Environment Mapping System, or FEMS. It's becoming increasingly operational. Some parts are already ready to go, and we'll talk about that in a bit. The FEMS station metadata. So instead of having to go through 2 or 3 different places with differing information on where a weather station was and what its configuration was, and all the info for it, it's now going to come from one singular source, which is called the WXX. It's the Wildland Fire Management Information System, if I remember correctly. Anyway, it's a replacement for that system, which was decommissioned a few years ago. So all of the data is going to come from a single authoritative source. And for the first time, FEMS is going to provide a single source of weather and fire danger information. And it's just as my counterpart here, Chris, is fire analyst at NWCC. It's like, Isn't that amazing? So he's been neck deep in dealing with all these issues with WIMS, and he is just so excited that everything's going to be in a single location. You're going to be able to get weather. National Fire Danger Rating System weather observations and forecasts, and NFDRS indices available in both a map form and a downloaded text form. One feature of WIMS was special interest groups and being able to do weighted averages for the NFDRS indices, but that's not going to be available in FEMS. Station grouping, so you can at least pull down the same set of station data, and some averaging options will be available in June. But if you do any of the SIG weighting for calculating fire danger indices, that's going to you need to do that on your own. So basically, you'll pull down your own data and do your own weighted averaging. Here's the sample of the three interfaces that are available. You're going to have that mapped interface with different pull down, so you can pull down weather, all sorts of weather elements. You're going to be able to pull down the NFDRS indices and get it viewable in a map form. And you'll also, by clicking the links up here at the top, be able to pull down some tabular data, which is going to be here, the live fuel moisture data. That's also taken over that database. And then also, here's your text data interface. I saw a chat or two come in there. Let me get that open up. Let me see. First, well, going back to Haynes Index, could it be more probabilistic than deterministic? Haynes Index itself, no, that's gone. That's to be using it's dead. It's not going to happen anymore. There's just not enough science behind even just the pure baseline of the Haynes Index. Does FEMS have any geospatial export or web services associated? Yes, this is all web-based. As far as geospatial, that might have to be a later project. But right now, all of the data can be downloaded in text form, although it's going to be cumbersome. And these guys are up against some deadlines that were rapidly accelerated on them. So they're just trying to get the basic conversion done. So maybe as a future development, once more development funding has been provided, but unfortunately, just for now, this is what you're going to get. The weather data, again, that's currently operational. The choice was made to keep data only from 2005 forward. There's some stations out there with data going back to the 80s, but as far as data available from 2005 forward or the beginning of the station history, whichever is later. And just kind of the way that we're seeing fire behavior and fire conditions change, even within the last 10 years, the smart folks, the scientists side, the analysis and analysts have decided to just keep weather data from 2005 and going forward. You're available to get it on that mapped form, or you can download it as a CSV file or as a FW21 file for importing into Fire Family Plus. That data from 2005 through 2022 underwent a QC process developed by the Desert Research Institute in Reno from University of Nevada, Reno. And then where there were missing data gaps in that period of record, they filled it in from the European reanalysis version 5 hourly estimates. And you can look at the QC flags within your downloaded weather data to see whether it was missing and gap filled or whether it's just questionable data and you'll want to correct it. Data from 2023 forward is just going to be raw coming out of FEMS. It's not QC'd nor gap filled. And if the user does decide or does determine that a lot of that suspect weather data, if they've got updated and corrected information for it, there will eventually be a process to feed that back to the FEMS team, and then FEMS will feed it back to Desert Research Institute, and that way we'll have a single authoritative source of corrected weather data. Again, just as the early stages, the corrections weren't made. There were some efforts made to try and gap fill on some questionable data, and just it didn't work is the simple answer. So moving forward, they're expecting to develop a methodology and a process to get questionable weather data corrected. The National Fire Danger Rating System data is going to be available via the download tab this Friday, March 7th. That was some of the late breaking information I got. But the mapping portion and being able to do some charts and et cetera will be available at some point in June. FEMS is using the exact same calculation engine as Fire Family Plus software, which was baselined on the March 2024 version. The calculations are also going to be using a full 24-hour weather stream as designed for NFDRS v4 versus WIMS using just a single daily observation and having to make all sorts of assumptions and interpolations to simulate what the NFDRS version 4 data would show. So therefore, the developers say a direct WIMS to FEMS comparison for NFDRS indices is not suggested. But it is entirely likely that the current fire management decision breakpoints should be pretty close for temporary use until fire analysts are able to do a full reanalysis with the updated and more representative of NFDRS v4 data. Your weather inputs into the observations are going to come from RAWs and satellite-derived snow cover, and your forecasted NFDRS indices are going to come from Weather Service provided gridded weather data. So no longer a text-based product, but taking the spatial gridded weather data from the Weather Service forecast offices. It's official forecast, plus some NWS provided gridded weather model data. The way NFDRS version 4 forecasts are working is that it requires a combination of things that aren't necessarily entirely available from one single source at this point. But ultimately, that should be pretty behind the scenes and kind of inside baseball for the actual usage by the fire danger community. And then finally, the FEMS live fuel moisture sampling database. This was also kind of a hodgepodge scenario prior to several years ago, and then systems started being decommissioned, servers that the systems were running on. And ultimately, this is now going to be the one-stop shopping for FEMS as well. So it now holds that live fuel moisture sampling database. It was previously on the wildland fire assessment system. That historic data was migrated over, and then observations beginning with April 2024 and forward would have been entered on FEMS. And so currently it's just a tabular data display, but graphical enhancements such as mapping should be released soon, and I believe they're also targeting June for that as well. So if you want more information on FEMS, I've got the links here on this slide, and should be available for downloading. If not, you can certainly reach out to me, and I will provide the slide deck for you as best I can. But you've got the project overview page, and these are all links within that project overview page, but you got user guides, training videos, including how DRI did their QCing and at least the initial gap filling process. Some of that information, I haven't watched the video lately, may be outdated based on information on the limitations to the data structure that's being kept from 2005 or station beginning, whichever was later. And then finally, the link at the bottom one is the FEMS interface, open for everybody right now. But if you want to be able to increase your ability to download, then you will have to create a login or already have a login available through login.gov or through FAMAuth for the government employees. And so that's it for me. Again, my contact information is here. Email is john.bonk@bia.gov, and phone number here at NWCC is 503-808-2756. And let's see, looking at questions from Bill. Have I looked at LAO DNB for nighttime fires? Bill, I have not looked at that myself. That's more probably tactical than I get from a strategic standpoint here. And so it's not a super useful product for us. When I come in the door, I can just see where the hotspots are and where the problems are going to be. And Jarrell asked about providing a link for that fuel moisture link. And Eric, thank you for providing that for me. So you made my job easy. And with that, William, I'll hand it back to you to facilitate any more questions.
Yeah, are there any more questions for John? Nope. Pedro, go ahead.
Hey John, thanks for the feedback, for the continued feedback for all this time. Glad to see that it's been useful, the retrievers. I should clarify the meaning of the live fuel moisture content and where we are heading. So right now, the live fuel moisture content applies for a generic or a mean plant, if you want to put it in this abstract context. So how we develop it is we went to these live fuel moisture content observations, I guess the ones you are pointing out that they will be now available in FEMS. And for a given site, all the samples of the live fuel moisture content retrievals were average for the different species. And that's how we train the regression model. This has limitations, obviously. You are mixing plants with different annual cycles and the like. But we are aware of this, and we are going to start working on extending or improving these live fuel moisture content retrievals. And the idea is going to go beyond this mean plant and have a few categories. So we will have to retrieve the location of a simplified classification of the species, which we are thinking in having grass, shrubs, and a tree category, at least. So these three simplified categories, we'll retrieve the location of them across conus, and then we will develop a specific fuel moisture content model for each one of these categories. And the idea is to update when available the website. But that's what it means, what we have right now, and where we are heading.
Great, Pedro. Thank you very much for that explanation. And I probably could have just reached out to you directly, but I didn't think about that. I didn't remember that I didn't know what exactly was going on until putting this presentation together. And also the other, I think I saw you guys starting to work on or at least have available the ability to snapshot the image. So I will reach that out and reach out to the person that mentioned that to me, and I'll let them know as well. So again, thanks all for all that effort that your team has done. Sure appreciate it.
Thank you. And John, we are not forgetting, I think you provided also another couple suggestions for the display that I forgot right now, but we are excuse me, we are taking a look to see if we can incorporate them.
That sounds great. Thank you, sir.
Go ahead, Dave.
Hey, John, great presentation. I was just wondering if you could take maybe like just 1 minute or 2 minutes and just describe a day in the life of John Bonk when he comes into the door to work during the day. What's your key focus when you walk through the door, and then what are the top products that you use to assess what you're doing?
Sure, and I'll just focus on the heart of fire season for what I do. I'll walk in the door, and right away we've got our flagship product, which is a 7-day significant fire potential outlook. And I guess I will let me interrupt for myself for a moment and state that Dave, about a year ago, again I gave a presentation here, so I don't know if William, if you got an easy access to that one, or at least to that recording that you can drop in the chat. But that really took it through how we do things here. But in general, I walk through the door, and first focus is getting that 7-day significant fire potential outlook out. Focusing not so much on today or tomorrow, but really day 3 through 7, and sometimes to some extent even day 10. Just trying to give our fire decision makers an idea of where significant fire activity or significant number of new ignitions may arise that could ultimately result in what's commonly referred to as a campaign fire, or basically a wildfire that's going to result in mobilization of an incident management team. And that's the first thing. What am I looking at? Anything and everything that I can get my hands on, which is largely just weather model data through either through government sources or private displays and entities. Again, just satellite seeing what's going on now as part of my forecast funnel is huge. So once I've got that product out, both on our local level and then attached to the national display, then focus starts shifting towards really doing a deeper dive on what's coming up the next several days. Whereas a lot of my 7-day thoughts are just making sure that my base thoughts are still valid, but then I'll dig deeper, start looking at where some potential fire concerns might be. We have a few briefings over the course of the middle part of the day. Then I transition to trying to find lunch at some point in there. And then ultimately for the afternoon, we've got our coordination center, kind of a flagship briefing is to all those fire managers over the regional fire managers. Sometimes we may get more than 200 people on that particular briefing. But again, where my focus is kind of on the strategic side of firefighting, where do we need resources? Where should we put resources, in advance of an episode versus the National Weather Service, which does the more tactical focus on those first few days of, okay, we've got firefighters on the ground. What are they going to be running into? And a little bit about my history is I am former National Weather Service forecaster and also incident meteorologist. So I've got that nice perspective on both sides of the playing field.
That's great. I appreciate that, John. And I'm just maybe put this in your thinking cap here, because I'll probably send you an email. But would it make sense for me to follow up and contact you if we're working with organizations like the utility sector to see how they can improve their wildfire intelligence?
I'd be happy to help. And we actually, here at the NWCC, part of our daily coordinating that goes on with the Weather Service also includes some private sector energy companies around, or power companies here in the Northwest as well. So we're in pretty tight together. And so, I think whatever we can do to further, the knowledge with the ultimate goal of protecting firefighters and, the public and their property at large is noble. And that we are not, at least here in the Northwest, we are by no means competitors. We are very strong collaboration for everybody working together for that common goal.
That's great. Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
John, I just have one quick question for you. I know I don't know if you're familiar with the probabilistic lightning forecast tool that Mike Pavlonis, John Centennial, and that group have been developing for the Weather Service, called Lightning Cast. The idea is, it's sort of more of a nowcasting type algorithm. Is that something that might be of use in the NICC, or are you looking more further out than a nowcasting perspective?
Yeah, nowcasting tools for us here at NWCC they're not that helpful. I mean, they'd be helpful from from some of the briefings that we give, especially during the afternoon. But really, our bread and butter is what's going on day 3 and beyond. And so, what we still heavily rely on is just that experience, and then trying to incorporate some of these tools, like from ECMWF or from the GFS. And we're pretty knee deep in doing our own algorithm development for trying to keep our processes as objective as possible, including development of number of ignitions and so on and so forth. I'm going to leave it to you smart people out there to keep working on the lightning forecasting, and I'll just stick with the experience and somewhat subjective side of doing lightning. But no, absolutely, if there's work being done out there that is shown to have, at least, I would say, a 70 to 80% reliability for being in the ballpark, as far as the actual cloud to ground flash counts, man, that would be a game changer for us.
Okay, I'll send you an email with John and Mike's email.
But yeah, I know I am familiar with their with at least the nowcasting side of it, I believe.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. It's always great to hear from you on as a user perspective on what you're using and what you need, what the needs are, and as a user of data and especially for fires. We really appreciate your time and your presentation.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, William.
And we will switch over to Arunas now. Oh yes, Arunas, are you going to present? Would you like to present, or Arunas, you're on mute.
There I am.
Yeah.
Yes, I can. Let me see if I can present this. I think I can. Okay, do you see that?
Yep, we see it.
Great. Okay. So thank you, John. Thank you for making my job a little easier with the Haynes Index. You did a great background of what I was going to present anyway. So that'll be actually a little further down the road. For now, from the front screen here, I just wanted to show you the people that are involved in our project and the two contractors, Lance Wilson and Lauren Porter. Lance will also present later on in this presentation. This has been a 4-year project funded by NOAA Leo, and we're entering our final year. And with some of the findings and the model, I'll present briefly. And then also it's ongoing in the sense that we're going to have users in the fire weather community to demonstrate our products that are on a web-based design. We're still working on that, and will become operational later on as the fire season nears. So this is something that we presented pretty much on most of the briefings, but it's good to kind of keep you familiar with what our flow chart looks like. So initially we developed this, what you see on the left is a very active fire time period over California, where you can see the dark purple dots that indicate the wildfires, the geo-detected wildfires. And what we do is we encircle 100-kilometer radius pink circles for each of the families that you see there in clusters. And we did that because we work with NewCaps data. And so we order NewCaps just specifically within each of those 100-kilometer radius so that we have a proper and effective data set to work on with our algorithm. Next, we develop from NewCaps, you can see the list of SKU-T plots up there in the upper right corner. And that basically is comprised of soundings that you see within the red circle over the map over Central California, over one of the hotter fires during this particular time. And just getting a close-up of it, what you see are within the green, in other words, the cloud-cleared NewCaps data, you see that there are 5 profiles surrounding that wildfire that give you a good sense of the profiling, the convective nature of that particular fire. And we also then determine its potential for pyrocumulonimbus or pyro-CB development. The red indicates the warmer colors, which are the higher probabilities that a pyro-CB event will occur within a nowcasting time window of 6 to 12 hours. It's thermodynamically derived, and their algorithm provides pyro-CB detection and monitoring. So this is the GeoIPS or skipping forward here. There we go. GeoIPS processing of the NRL Pyro CVs. On the left, you see a list of regions within this website that we're going to have users demonstrate our products on. And so there are various domains that you see primarily within the California region. And if you take one of the boxes there, which is the second to the left, on the right, you see the blow up of it, and it's basically covers all of California. And of interest there are the fires that occurred in Southern California during this time, which is in September last year, September 7th of 2024. And it's the Line fire, I believe. And you can see the blow up. The orange on the right indicates those clouds that have Pyro CV signatures within them. The actual active fires are within those light purple dots that you can see with the fire. So that's what the user would basically look at. They would demonstrate to see if that the look and feel of it, and then the actual circles that you see are the predictions. So for example, the orange provides you 60 to 80% probability that a Pyro CV event will occur. And in this particular case, it actually did occur. Doesn't always, but it's just obviously we picked the best of the suite there. These are the list of our stakeholders. These stakeholders actually fit into several of our projects as users, and I'm not going to go through the entire list, but basically we're looking at the U.S., Canadian Forest Service, Alaskan Forest Service, and also we actually have some members within the Australia community as well. And with this, I will pass the baton over to Lance, who will describe some of the latest developments that we have within the Pyro CV prediction. So Lance, please take over.
Great, thanks, Arunus. So this first slide is just kind of a status update of where we currently are with the image-based version of our product. So as Arunus mentioned, we are using the NuCap's thermodynamic probabilities to siphon data into our model to produce a prediction of Pyro CV development, and that goes into the circles in this image. The background imagery of this image had previously been kind of an infrared-based type of thing, and to simplify the display somewhat, we've now updated it to use geocolor as a background, since that's a little more intuitive to people. And then the final piece of this is that to produce a forecast, we have been focused on doing an event-based forecast, so we need to know where the fires are located. And up till now, we have been using the GOES ABI Level 2 fire data to find our events. Next slide, please. So what we are now looking to do in the upcoming months is to incorporate the next generation fire system, or NGFS, into our system to use as the source of the event locations, since NGFS is a little bit more robust about making sure that the data you're seeing is actually a wildfire and keeping it persistence in cloud cover and stuff like that. So this image on the right is kind of just a first draft example of what that will look like in the image-based framework that we have been producing. But what we're also looking to do is to send these Pyro CV nowcasts back to NOAA to incorporate into NGFS and also into Real Earth, with the goal being that early this fire season we'll have these Pyro CV probabilities available in multiple forms in multiple locations. Next. And this kind of schematic just kind of shows how that data flow will work. So NOAA produces the NGFS data already, and they will pass that to us, and then we will calculate the piracy B probabilities for those locations, produce an alternate text-based output, and then we will pass that back to NOAA to incorporate into NGFS, and then also they can visualize it in real Earth as they see fit. So next. So that's kind of one avenue of new development that we'll be looking at. The other piece is, which will be more what Arunas is going to talk about, starts in how our performance for this model was recorded over last year's fire season. So we collected data from early July through October, looking at kind of the significant wildfires that would have potential to produce a piracy B if the atmosphere was conducive towards it. And we looked at how our model actually performed on those. And for the most part, it does pretty good. We have, when there are piracy Bs, we predict them pretty well. When they're not there, we are doing a pretty good job predicting that they're not going to happen. But what we find is that we have a bit of a problem with false positives, where we are forecasting that something will occur, but it does not occur. And what we are suspecting is that many of those fires are actually plume-dominated fires. And I will turn that back over to Arunas to discuss some of our plans that we'll be looking at with those fires.
Arunas, you're on mute.
Okay. So this comes back to what was already described by John Bach, which is we're replacing the Haynes Index, and we have a particular approach on how to deal with this. So John provided the background and the fact that the Weather Service has discontinued the Haynes Index. It's been around since, 1988? And even the author mentioned that it was really not intended to be this full-blown operational vehicle that it has been for all this time. On the right, you can see it's a basic formula. It's thresholding, as you can see on the right, and it's divvied up between low, mid, and high elevation. So it doesn't really provide a realistic picture on for a lot of the regions in the U.S., but it's been used, and I guess in some ways it was somewhat successful depending on where you are. So let me, there we go. And so it was never intended to be operational, but NOAA and NASA has used it extensively, and even NewCaps has their own version of the Haynes Index calculations. And then you can see the various fire agencies that also applied it. So this is an example of what I would call an ill-defined assessment of fire severity. So this is Northwest U.S., and you can see where the Haynes Index is showing very moderate to high. In other words, very a high potential for wildfires to increase in intensity, especially convectively. So this would lend itself toward pyro-CB development. And so what we're looking at specifically here, the star that you see in the lower right is the Pony Elk Fire that is located in Idaho. And I don't want to go through too much. Basically, I'll just stick with the color blocks there. That shows that it's within a moderate and high. But as someone who wants to assess the severity of fire, I mean, that's a tough thing to look at and just say, well, it's big, but it's how do we use it operationally? Not that easy. Here's a little bit of improvement. When you use the NewCaps to improve the assessment of fire severity, you can see that it's not as extensive in terms of the color blocking, so it's not as, I guess, a gross depiction. It's still far from what we would want to see, but it does provide an improvement. And so basically what the summary that you see there is that we're looking at evaluating skill sets of the current model that we developed and predicting plume activity. We've been focusing on pyro-CBs, but you could actually apply this for features less than the actual, the ones that almost hit the stratosphere. I mean, it would be of any plume activity that occurs over the wildfires. and that we would have something similar to the Haynes, an arbitrary index category, ranking from 0 to 6 being the most hazardous for, say, pyro-Q development. And then we would tune the model to maximize skill in predicting general plume-dominated fires. So John mentioned briefly, that there are a number of parameters that need to be worked on, improved in order to really get a sense of, to establish a better and more exacting way of determining the fire intensity potential. And so what I did was we have a conceptual model of pyro-CB. And from this, we actually extract certain stability parameters that you see on the right-hand side, potential instability all the way down to LCL. And so in thinking about this next process, which is how to address a replacement to the Haynes index, we would use these features that we got extracted from machine learning in order to then develop the potential for a convective activity that would occur in near real-time fashion. So this is part of what we would apply toward a project now that is being funded to us by NOAA to look into this, to explore this, and to develop our own severity index set, if you will. So this is our 2-year game plan. Year 1, which will be starting this year. There are 2 general aspects to this. One is to develop the wildland fire growth index. And so we would look at our current training data set, which is very robust for North America. We have a data set actually that goes all the way back from 2013 to the current time. So we're very rich in terms of pyro-CB and then convective features leading up to pyro-CB. And then we would basically look at the new CAPS profiles and all the variants of the Haynes index. Excuse me 1 second here. Okay, and then we compare the new CAPS Haynes index values to stability parameters processed by the model that I just presented. And then that would be year 1, and then year 2 would be the actual evaluation and demonstration of the wildland fire growth index that you see there. I want to go through it, but basically that's our step-by-step process in replacing the Haynes index. In addition to the Haynes index, for this year, we've also been looking at developing the pyro-CB algorithm. So in 2024, in this particular example, it's the Falls Fire in Oregon. What we've been doing is collecting cases. I think there were 19 cases that we collected from July through the end of September of this past year. And this would be applied to a variety of studies, case studies, not only for the Haynes index, but also for FireX experiments and other projects that we have on board. So what we're doing is collecting cases. What we did was collect cases. This is the particular example. And as part of the collection, we would have animations, for example, the hotspots, along with the plumes that you can see developing. And this is using the Sierra slider animation. And then we would have the prediction, the product prediction. On the top panel is before the pyro-CB, and you can see the probabilities circles around each of these hotspots that you see in the purple. And then later on, you can see during the pyro-CB events where they all are grayed out. I would actually have to ask Lance to interpret this, because this is the first time I'm really looking at this with any intensity as to why all of a sudden the colors are different from top to bottom. Lance, can you shed any light on that?
So this was when we were just beginning to run this in near real time, so you're still working out some kinks with figuring out how to pass data into the prediction system. So this is just a case where there was data passed in the earlier times, and then the later times we weren't passing anything in, so we weren't getting any result.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thanks for clarifying that. And that's it for my presentation. Here are the contact folks. Actually, the primary, the SME of our project, many of you know him, is David Peterson. And his email is listed there, and then my email as well. So that's it for me, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ernest. Really great presentation. And Lance, also a very great presentation as well. I know I saw a lot of, or several people in there in the chats that from Julia and Bruno were saying that they'd be interested in looking at this. So I think we got some good, some potentially some new contacts to work with. Julia has a question about how similar are the calculations you do with new cap soundings to the way that the PFT flag is calculated.
I can't answer that directly.
Yeah, I can take that one. So, so the PFT is a tool that was developed by Kevin Torrey in Australia. That requires, similarly to new caps and these others, all of them depend on an atmospheric stability profile. All of ours and PFT get at that in slightly different ways. The limiting factor with new caps versus PFT is that PFT requires wind information. So there's a Briggs plume component computed. So, when we started this project under JPSS, the idea was to see how far can we get, exclusively using satellite data for pyroconvective early warnings. And so, we were able to do pretty well here, just using those data as early warnings. In another project that wasn't presented here, we're actually doing a much more detailed machine learning effort where the PFT and a number of other fire-related variables and composite indices are used as inputs to also work toward pyroCV probabilities that could be run in numerical weather prediction space. And so those forecasts would be able to run out multiple days using the model fields, but that's still early in its development phase. So this new CAPS remote sensing based tool is far enough along now where we hope to be able to demonstrate it. Some of the more advanced predictive tools are still not quite at that level of readiness. So hopefully that helps. And PFT is being used in all of these things as a comparison. So, in that machine learning framework, we can gain skill over PFT by itself using PFT along with other variables. We can also gain skill a little bit over just using the thermodynamic information we have here by including atmospheric dynamics and other components. So this gives you an idea that we're still in the infancy of developing these tools, but that's kind of where we're at.
Go ahead, Dave.
Hey, Ernest, it's Dave. I was just wondering if you could describe in easy to understand terms why it's important to know where pyroCVs might form.
If you want to take that.
Yeah, so the pyroconvective process has a range of potential impacts and hazards. So the obvious is if you're a firefighter or if there's evacuations going on and pyroconvection develops, you create hazardous conditions near the fire. The inflow winds and the downdrafts from the pyroconvection can greatly change the near fire environment. It creates a feedback loop where the fire is feeding the thunderstorm is accelerating air upwards, and then more air is coming in to fill that void. And once that process starts, it's truly fire generated weather. So it changes the firefighting environment dramatically. Also, having the convective cloud overhead that's filled with smoke creates, it makes an environment that's very dark as well in the middle of the day, and it can preclude any firefighting aircraft operations and that sort of thing. So that's that's the fire scale. These can also generate or help to generate fire tornadoes, if you will. Not quite the same as the mesocyclone version, but there have been tornado warnings issued for PyroCBs. That the first one happened in 2020. So, that's the near fire environment. The second part of this is smoke forecasting. So every time there's a pyroconvective cloud, whether it's pyrocumulus or PyroCB, smoke is being pushed to whatever level of the atmosphere that those clouds reach. That process is not included in any smoke transport forecast. So, any of the models, whether it's HER smoke, whether it's the global forecast models, whatever it may be. And so there will be errors in smoke transport, and there will also be errors in feedbacks. So if you're running radiation in a model that accounts for the effect of the smoke, and the smoke is not at the right altitude or in the right location, the feedbacks on weather will be wrong. And also we've learned that the properties of PyroCB smoke after being injected through the cloud are much different than those of smoke that's assumed, in typical environments, which affects the radiative effect. So that's the second piece. And then the third piece is some of these PyroCBs inject smoke directly into the stratosphere. And so that's where you get the more global scale type impacts that we've seen in recent years. And the feedbacks from those are not well constrained. So, it's multifaceted impacts that spans quite a broad range of scales.
And just to, I don't know, kind of dovetail on what Dave just said, it's not just PyroCBs that obviously the firefighting community is afraid about. It's also any kind of convective activity during that time. So any signal that comes above minimum threshold would be of concern. So any PyroQ aspects leading up to PyroCB would contain a lot of those issues as well, such as tornadoes and lightning and spotting situations. So, and that's part of, I think, Dave, what we're working on with the Haynes Index is that we're not only, or Haynes Index replacement, is that it's not just the big PyroCB aspects, but also convection leading up to that.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Arunas and Dave for that, for describing that. And I'll just put this out for you to think about. We can connect via email as well. But we've been asked to work more with the All Hazards Consortium and just a myriad of industries and organizations that are stakeholders within that group to come up with weather impact briefings that they could watch on video, which will extend our reach into various products that are being produced at NOAA that we would like to highlight. This maybe being one of them. So if you think it's valuable for us to be a stakeholder with you from the standpoint of how to use these products in a briefing sort of format for what may or may not develop and the impacts there, then we'd be happy to work with you.
Well, Dave, that would be awesome. I mean, part of my my job would be to collect the stakeholders, and if you have a resource of additional stakeholders, that would be that's exactly what I'm looking for. The more, the merrier for us. So yeah, appreciate any help you can provide us with.
Great. I'll send you an email, Arunas. Thanks.
John, you have your hands up.
Well, that goes for anyone on here. So if you want to be included in our list, just email the email address that you see on the screen. That we can include you that way.
Okay, yeah, and I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing with this. And I just, in case it's not there, I just want to re-emphasize that a lot of these same effects of extreme vertical motion coming out of a fire column are often felt even before the column reaches the LCL to turn into even pyrocumulus. So that is I'm imagining that a lot of this work you guys are doing has broad application of even sub quote cloud level vertical motion in strong and convective development. One thing that I'm just kind of imagining and wish casting, I will say, is that I would think that once you've developed the relationships between the various meteorological elements, that this could be moved beyond a nowcasting device. And once we have like an algorithm, we can take the inputs from anything, really, a long range model, a short range model. Just want to, make sure that I'm thinking correctly on that. Is that how you guys are kind of envisioning?
Exactly. So if you're interested in doing that, and if you have someone who's interested in making that application, we could potentially facilitate that. It is in our to-do list, right? So I mentioned in another project, we're looking at this in numerical weather prediction space. So we would have to take the version of the algorithm that we use now that takes thermodynamic information from NewCaps and tweak that to use thermodynamic data from a model grid, but it shouldn't be that difficult. At least that's our thinking. Also, these predictors have been trained on a global inventory of PyroCV information that we maintain at NRL. So we're training on the most extreme form of plume-dominated fire. But as you saw in that slide Lance showed with our prediction skill, we have these false positives. Most of the false positives we see are essentially fires that are plume-dominated but don't get all the way to PyroCV. So that's where this link with the Haynes index has come in, because so much of this is based on stability and thermodynamics. It's far more sophisticated than the basic thresholds used in that portion of the Haynes index. So it's very likely that we're doing a pretty good job of predicting plume-dominated fires. It's just not all of those that we predict go on to produce a full PyroCV. That's the current hypothesis, anyway.
Alrighty, I appreciate that, and I'll be definitely watching very, very closely, and hopefully as conditions allow for at least the next few years in my career, that hopefully I'll be able to get more involved. But at this point, I'll be a very, very interested bystander.
Okay, sounds great.
Great. Great. Thank you both, Arunus and Dave and Lance, for your presentations with all the great comments and questions. I'll open it up to see if there's any other questions left for I guess either John or Arunus that anybody might have. If not, we will be having our next meeting in May, because we are doing every other month. Really appreciate everybody coming to this meeting, and really appreciate the great discussions that we had, and learning more about Runus's, the NRL's future plans, as well as the current state of the algorithm. There's of course hearing from John again as a user. It's always great to hear how things have evolved since the last time we talked. So with that, I'll end the meeting. Oh, Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, William. I just wanted to mention, just for everybody on the call, two things that we're working on. Number one, I've presented on this in the past, but we work with the All Hazards Consortium. They have about 45,000 stakeholders that work with them across the country, but it's mainly in energy sector. So all the investor-owned utilities, communication sector like AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast, food, fuel, medical supply, pharmaceutical sectors, logistics, transportation, stuff like that. And they have All Hazards Consortium has just asked me to lead a committee there called the Weather Impacts Committee. And so we've had a couple meetings already, and basically we are going to be identifying key gaps in basically weather or environmental intelligence information gaps that exist that could be useful for them to improve efficiencies in their operations and also their situational awareness. So that's one thing that we'll be working on with them. So we'll be reaching back into some of the JPSS initiatives here with questions and on data and products and whatnot that we can bring to their attention. And the other thing is that I've been asked by it's called the Edison Electric Institute. They're the ones that support. It's an association for all of the investor-owned utilities to be a speaker at a major utility meeting coming up in April in Denver. And I want to talk to them about the latest in wildfire detection and forecasting technologies. So I might be back in touch here during March or even beforehand to make sure that my understanding of things that exist are accurate. And if I've missed anything, that you bring it to my attention. So that's it.
Thanks, Dave. Really appreciate that. So yeah, with that, we will conclude our meeting for today. I'll try to get up the recording by the end of the day. So have a great day, great rest of your day. See ya. Bye.